Welcome to The Wealthy Healthy, the podcast and blog dedicated to inspiring better mental, physical, and financial health. I'm your host, Ricky Newton, and 'tis the season, my friends. It's the season of holiday playlists and colder weather and eggnog, and of course, for us Californians, it means succumbing to mild changes in temperature, and our worlds fall apart as a result. So excuse me if I lose my voice at all during today's episode. Fortunately, it shouldn't matter too much because I am joined on the podcast by a wonderful guest, my friend Kyle Glenn. Kyle is a filmographer and photographer in the Bay Area who is the lead singer and songwriter in our band, as well as a host of his own podcast called Pattern Interrupt, where he and his co-host explore the concept of creativity. So it's with great pleasure that I welcome Kyle to The Wealthy Healthy.
Hello.
How's it going?
Great.
Awesome. So I know that we wanted to speak today largely on creativity because that's been obviously a huge driving force in your life. Myself too, I use creativity personally as an outlet. It's really important for my own mental stability, I feel like. So in your case, I would love to get just a little bit of background for you to share, because I don't even know if I know really kind of where you got your start, but just give me a sense of where you got your start in terms of, creativity and the arts, and what kind of triggered the decision for you to actually pursue that as a career.
Cool, yeah. Well, I grew up in the Pacific Northwest in Portland, Oregon. Rains a lot, spent a lot of time inside. And I think that had a lot to do with it. But it's also beautiful, so it's a very inspiring place. And in fourth grade, a new kid moved to school, and his name was Austin Hillebrecht, and he wanted to make a movie for his parents' anniversary. And so we started scripting it out, and it was very like Monty Python-esque, and had a spoof of Staying Alive by the Bee Gees.
Okay.
With a chicken. But we never made the movie.
Okay, I was going to say, what is this?
No, the ideas got too big. So, but he was kind of the first person. We decided that we wanted to make movies. That's what we wanted to do. We were watching, George Lucas, Star Wars, Indiana Jones, and we would play a lot of games together, just imaginary games of,
right.
Like we're two kids traveling through time, fighting bad guys or whatever. So yeah, meeting Austin was kind of like the big impetus of like, this is the trajectory that I want to go on. And so
that was in fourth grade?
That was in fourth grade. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And so I was kind of on that, for better or worse, that trajectory ever since. I went to an arts middle school where I focused on, drama a lot, acting and as well as creative writing. And then I went to a high school that had a strong drama program.
So is this something that you had expressed to your parents and that they were really supportive of? Because like an arts middle school, what is that?
Well, in Portland we have magnet schools. So there's a lot of different, so you have like your neighborhood middle schools, which are kind of like standard, but then as I was growing up, a lot of them started to take on kind of what you call magnet programs, which could attract from different parts of the city. So you'd have like your environmental middle school, which had a lot of environmental sustainability programs. You would have your kind of technology middle school that, just focused on that type of stuff. We weren't quite to programming yet, but so we had Da Vinci Arts Middle School, which was just celebrated its 20th year of being around. I was 3 years into it being a thing. So it was pretty new. And it just had a focus on, that had ceramics. We did dance instead of PE. So
that's awesome.
Tap, jazz, ballet. That's what gives my stage moves such an edge.
Oh.
Yeah.
I knew that it came from somewhere, that stage presence. I love having the background now. That context is awesome.
I don't remember when I told my folks that I wanted to make movies for a living, but I was very fortunate that they've been supportive kind of my, I don't know, like now I feel like been kind of, it's a lot easier than even when I was growing up to say like, oh, I want to make videos.
Yeah.
And see kind of a route to get there. When I was growing up, like,
there was no YouTube and there was no like phone cameras, and like really easy access.
I mean, we were still, when I was growing up, doing tape to tape, editing, like from the VHS-C camcorder to the VCR, like tape to tape, and we were shooting little animations with our toys, and various other videos. So it was just kind of something we were always doing. And my parents supported me in at least exploring the arts.
Right.
We nowadays, though, you see like every community college has a video program, you know? So as I was graduating high school, I started looking around at colleges and decided to forego, because back when I was growing up, it's like USC, you know? Like UCLA.
Yeah.
Like if you want to make film,
yeah,
you got to go to those places, and you have to do 2 years of an undergrad and then apply, and then 13 people get in.
Exactly.
You know? And for whatever reason, I never really thought that I, had that chance.
Okay.
I don't know.
I mean, it is very selective.
It is very selective.
Yeah.
And, that probably plays into like some of my limiting beliefs today, but
which we could get to.
Yeah.
But okay, so you're saying like your parents were supportive of it, but do you feel like they ever had any concerns? Because everyone sort of knows that stereotype of the struggling artist and the Uber driver who's a painter, and like the trying to make ends meet and sleeping on floors and couch surfing, but that's not really, you're not in that scenario. You have an apartment in the Bay Area, and
right.
you get projects from time to time, but you're a very busy guy, but you're able to manage all of it pretty well. So from like a kind of from a financial standpoint as well, how do you find that, and what's kind of your response to that idea of the struggling artist?
Well, the struggling artist is the thing. I feel like with everything, there's the word is escaping me.
Trajectory, continuum?
A continuum, yeah, of things, right? And on one end, you have like the starving artist, and on the other end, you have like plenty of people that are living their dreams.
Yeah.
I think right now I wouldn't consider my video work to necessarily be my artistic work.
Okay.
So I make a living making videos right now. Whether it's like creatively fulfilling all the time isn't, I'm not
well,
out
it's
there.
work at the end of the day, right?
It's work. And, I feel more creatively fulfilled through my music.
Right.
And at which point, like, if, and I go back and forth with this question all the time, because the starving artist really comes from the idea that, like, you're working a job in order to supplement your income so that you can practice your art.
Right.
And I think, I don't know, it's hard to say. I guess I have been in times where it's like, I definitely was, eating top ramen. And
I mean, I think any career, you pick any career and you're going to have, there's highs and lows.
Yeah.
Like there's times where there's struggling computer scientists out there, maybe not as many, just because at a baseline, it's easy in this area to find those jobs. But you could say that for anybody.
Yeah, and I mean, Portland was a very easy place to grow up and be broke and working in the creative arts. I don't know if you've heard of Portlandia. Portland's the place where young people go to retire. Everybody was kind of like getting by, and enjoying it. I feel like I try to live in an abundant mindset and a positive place. And the starving artist is kind of just such a small place, and it's such a matter of perspective. Because, you might be physically starving, or you might not have as much, but like, or you might be starving yourself with your day job, starving yourself of your energy, Yeah,
that's true.
But that's giving you the means to pursue what it is that gives you joy and your creative outlet. Which
presumably that's why why you've chosen to pursue this as a career, right? It is what I mean, on the video side as well as on the music side, but it's what gives you that joy, right? It's what you find fulfilling. So in terms of your mental health as a response to creativity, how do you feel that creativity affects it? Because I think that there's a lot of people who feel like they're naturally creative, and then there are people who feel like they aren't.
Right.
And you have sort of happy and unhappy people in both camps. But as an outlet, as in terms of keeping you stable, how would you kind of categorize creativity in that whole, in that whole collection of things that contributes to that?
I mean, creativity for me is just it's important to a balanced, life. For me, I have a lot of things going on or a lot of ideas at any given time, and And I realized that like it's a way for me to express myself. I can be kind of a quiet person or not take like the center stage a lot. And so it just gives me a way to express thoughts and ideas and feelings across different mediums. So it keeps me from getting bored too. Because I like this idea of hopping from project to project as energy kind of flows. Or, you know, if I get bored with one thing, I can kind of like respect the energy cycle of a project.
Yeah.
Or of an outlet. Say if I'm, you know, like really into screen printing for a little bit, or really into music for a little bit, or really into film or photography for a little bit. And the other things, you know, kind of like, I feel like if I have enough plates spinning, then I can kind of bounce around when I feel the energy waning on other stuff.
Yeah.
Which is important to me because I feel like a lot of things move in cycles, especially energy and interest in projects. And it's important to like not feel like you're never going to be able to do it again, or you're never going to be interested in that again, or you're like
burn out on it.
Yeah, you're burnt out on it. It's just like, no, sometimes things like, if it's a circle, you know, sometimes things drop to the bottom of the circle and something else comes up into the top, and you can focus on that and enjoy that. And then, you know, you keep the other one kind of like simmering on the back.
So that makes sense from like a mental health standpoint, but what about from a time management standpoint? Because I have seen that you are working on multiple projects at any given time. So, I mean, you're busy.
Yeah.
So how do you prioritize the things in your life that, whether they're making you money like the video work, or whether they're just fulfilling things on the side like some of the music is, or, you know, like how do you, when you do have all those different plates spinning, how are you keeping them from crashing to the floor?
That's a good question. That's a constant kind of, you know, that's a constant battle, and something that I don't feel like I'll ever truly master. But there's a lot of like tools out there, and that's another hard thing, especially with the podcast. Like we're always like kind of reading and taking in new information and like trying to apply it, but maybe like trying to apply it too soon before like we've really like looked at the results of like other methods. So like with time management, I mean, my biggest thing is like I have a base amount of money I need to make.
Right.
You know?
Right.
So that's kind of like,
you have to pay rent and eat food.
I gotta pay rent and eat food,
Yeah.
and pay my car
Right.
and my student loans and, you know, all that shit. So there's an importance to that. I had a job, for a steady job, you know, with a salary for about 2.5 years.
Yeah.
And that was cool because before that, for like, I don't know, 5 years, I was freelancing.
Right.
So it was cool for the limited amount of time to have a steady paycheck. I found myself still like scraping by towards the end of the month, you know, for whatever reason. And then I started budgeting.
Yeah.
And then it started to get better, but I'd already decided to leave. And so now I'm freelancing again. And
right. But you had some budgeting skills now.
I have some budgeting skills
right.
now. Yeah. And I feel that I kind of tackle my day because when I left, I was like, wouldn't it be awesome if I could spend 2 hours a day on 5 different projects that were all making me a little bit of money?
Right.
I'm not there yet.
Right.
But I do.
But wouldn't it be cool?
Wouldn't it be cool? Yeah.
Right.
But I have found that like with the flexibility of freelancing, I'm able to like access my day in more of a productive way for me.
Like you can work at night on things if you want to. You know, it's not like.
And I do, but I find myself not. You know, like I could, but sometimes I don't. So it's kind of like, you know, I found that the morning, like I'm really creative between like 8 and 10:30.
Interesting.
You know, so
I'm not.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm on Reddit between 8 and 10:30 in the morning.
Yeah. So if I want to like execute something creative or like get something done, I should put that time aside, you know?
Right.
I was doing this thing called the Miracle Morning for a little bit, which is a method of kind of getting some stuff out of the way in the morning where you wake up, you know, so I was waking up at 5. And you do these things called the savers, as they call it. So Hal Elrod is the author of the Miracle Morning. And it's silence, affirmation, visualization, E. I don't remember what E is for. Affirmation, visualization. E, I don't remember. R is reading.
Basically just a set of things to do in the morning.
Yeah, and you can take as long as you want for them. So it's like you wake up, you meditate, you do some visualization, you do some... so that was kind of like really setting me up nice for the day. So I do that between like 6 to 8 or whatever, or go for a run. And then 8 to 10, knock out whatever like creative thing I want, whether that's like for paid work or for, writing a new song or whatever,
right?
Or writing. That was the money area for me. And then after that, move into, work or, more technical stuff, or maybe do the morning 8 to 11, 8 to noon, have lunch, and then move into kind of the technical. Like, oh, there's this video project where I'm like putting in words or whatever. It doesn't take a lot of like that creative thinking. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, no, I think that definitely speaks to it.
Time management.
Yeah, that is where we started there. Yeah.
I mean, and I'm still figuring it out because there's always things coming in and out.
Yeah.
And I don't do that currently. What I just said, this is
right.
a reminder.
You tried it.
I should go back and like try to get that solid again because I found a lot of positive results from it. But
interesting.
Just like anything, you can fall off the new things come into your life, and you have to like figure out how to add it in or let something else slide.
So. Obviously, with the theme of this show, this isn't necessarily something that we discussed talking about, but I think it's worth thinking about because so let's say somebody who's listening to this right now is they are much more interested in a creative pursuit as a career, and they're more creatively inclined, and that's what they want to do as a job. You mentioned like having student loans and things like that. So speak a little bit about the arts as a profession from a financial perspective, because I mean it's so in keeping with this show, but
right.
Obviously so you're already kind of denouncing the struggling artist, the starving artist thing, but at the same time like you said, like you were still kind of just scraping by even when you had this steady paycheck, and you still have to kind of think about managing priorities based on what's going to get your rent paid, things like that. So what would you say to somebody like maybe looking back on your own experience trying to get to the point that you're at now? What are the things that you might have done differently, just strictly from a financial perspective?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think, it's important to realize that I still have like a day job, and that's making videos at this point.
Right. You're not going into the office necessarily.
Right. But that's kind of what it feels like. I have work,
right.
And that work allows me to do the other things that are more like creative outlets now. And the work that I do means that I don't find myself doing that as a creative outlet anymore.
The video specifically. You're not doing that as a hobby as much as you are other things.
I'm not out making music videos as much. I'm not, I'm not currently like writing anything, like a feature.
Right.
So, it's hard to say looking back, because part of me is like, it's like, what if I hadn't gone into this as a technical trade?
Right.
Luckily, I mean, I lucked out because my trade took off.
Yeah.
Especially because of Silicon Valley.
Right.
And startups in San Francisco.
Yeah.
Like, Portland was tough. Looking back, I should have left a lot sooner.
For the Bay Area.
Or for anywhere, really.
Yeah.
I had a friend that she went to Phoenix. And she came back, and we had all gone to school together, all gone to college. I went to the Art Institute of Portland, which is like geared towards it's based off of an assembly line structure of getting products out into the world, those products being me, a technical like videographer. Right?
Right.
So she went to Phoenix. She came back. She's like, guys, you don't get it. Like outside of Portland, like people ask you to do stuff, but they expect that you'll want to get paid for it.
As opposed to in Portland.
Portland was very much like
a
culture of like, hey, help me out,
Right.
like, oh, we'll help each other out, you know, and it's like, okay, well, helping each other out doesn't like feed me, And
have you found that in like outside of Portland? Because you've also like traveled and been a couple other places other than Portland and the Bay Area.
Mm-hmm.
Have you done work in other cities as well and found the sort of similar trend? Is that something that you think is sort of unique to Portland, or just like there's probably small pockets of?
I think there's small pockets. I've heard similar feelings about Austin, I think.
Yeah.
I was talking to somebody from Austin this past week that said they had similar things there. I think part of it is, when you go to a place that has so many creatives, it's hard to like break through the ceiling. And Portland, when I left, there were a lot of people from California coming in that had made their careers other places. They wanted to raise a family.
Right.
So they were coming in and taking a lot of kind of those jobs.
Right.
So there's like no ladder to really climb. So I guess to answer your questions, one thing, like take a critical look at the place that
you live. Right.
Especially if you grew up there.
And be willing to
try something else, at least for a little bit.
Right.
I didn't go away to college. Maybe I should have done that, For a long time, I wanted to be in Portland and make Portland the thing. And I mean, and Portland's still a great place, and I love it. But, it wasn't working for me at the time. Moving down here, instead of 1 out of every 5 people who does video, air quotation marks, 1 out of every 20 does down here. Like, and it's a commodity that's needed and that can be paid for.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's true in other places across the country, bigger cities, bigger markets.
Is that something that you typically do for companies or for individuals? Like, have you found a niche? Do you find that? Because I know that there's got to be, in the creative space, there are definitely people who find their niche and they're like, oh, I serve the this community or the that community. Like, have you done that? Is that something that
I guess
you
right
found
now
works? Or
my niche would be chiropractic.
Okay, how did you fall into that?
Well, I worked for a chiropractic college for 2.5 years. That was my salary job, doing video and photography and stuff for them in the Bay. And then when I left that, I kind of got connected with some people that had graduated. And so while I don't have a steady job, I do 40 to 60 hours a month for them on kind of like a contract.
Yeah. Okay.
And so that's kind of my big thing right now.
Right.
Other than that, I do work for various other companies. I struggle sometimes because I'm kind of a man or a jack of all trades, if you want to say. It's definitely a place where you got to carve out your niche, I guess, which is, I do great on my own and I do great with like 2-person crews. If I have a friend who's like the director shooter, and I can fill everything else for them, and I love doing that stuff too. It's a lot of fun. The other thing though that I would highly recommend in a creative field is business classes.
Yeah.
I still haven't done it. That's something I need to do. I need to talk to somebody. I need an accountant. I need to take an accounting class and a business class, because I'm still out here like, I'm making a living wage, but come April, like how much of that, like how much am I going to regret how I've handled my taxes,
Right.
So it's kind of like that, and they didn't teach that at school. And that's the thing. Like I even hear, other trade schools, like that's people don't get the education they need in business and finance. And for a long time I thought maybe, it's like something that's not important to me and maybe I should just shove it off on somebody else. But it's like, and maybe I'm not good enough, it comes to those limiting beliefs, maybe because I've been a creative, right? I grew up as a creative. I create. I like that.
And you think of that as distinct from the business mind or the...
Well, and that's the limiting belief that I've been led to believe, right? Is that these are different, that I can't hold
left
both
brain,
of those spaces,
right brain.
Yeah, I mean, you grow up and you're raised, with a sibling and like, oh, they're the athletic one, they're the creative one, right? Like, we've heard that.
Yeah.
And so you get, from an early age, kind of get this division where you start believing that you don't hold the capacity for the other side. Which is my biggest thing with creativity and pattern interrupting creative thinking is that like wanting people to know that like even if you've been told you're the athletic one or you're not creative, like we all have that capacity. Right. So the big one for me is that capacity of like being business minded or being, like I don't know how exactly what you would call it. Like,
well, I get what you're saying. Like. Yeah, more like I would say business-minded, right? There are people who are business-minded. Like if you look at in my work, I work with a lot of creative agencies and ad agencies. And very often you have people who are media buyers, who are sort of the connectors and the conduits between people and the product itself. Then you've got definitely the creative team who are supposed to be the creative people. And you've got the analysts who are very technical. But the best functioning agencies tend to be the ones that don't silo those things. So it's kind of to your point, right? Like if you think of yourself as a company, then you would be one that's able to do the networks and the human connections and the actual legwork, and also the creative thing, and also the operations and the analysis afterwards, and then optimizing for the future.
Right.
It's a weird analogy, but
yeah. Well, I mean, and there's like, and eventually I do want to be able to pay somebody to take that stuff off my plate.
Sure. I mean, I think my parents do. Like they have like my dad could do it, but he just would rather have, like, he has a tax person or an accountant or whatever.
Yeah.
Like,
and that might be my solution too. Because like another part of it too is how much time do you want to spend doing those things? And for me, like the act of creation is the biggest part for me.
Right.
I like making stuff, and I want people to see it or hear it or touch it or be involved with it.
Right.
But distribution is really difficult for me, like even getting it out. Because by the time I finish a project, I'm like, I'm on to the next project. I want to be making, like, talking to, about maybe starting like a paper goods company. And it's like, I don't want to become a fulfillment house, Like I want to like screen print stuff and I want to make stuff. But
you don't want to do
but if I'm the guy that's like
shipping
shipping it out all the time, like I don't mind it at first.
Right,
Like, if you start to have like a big influx coming in, and it's like now all I'm doing is just fulfilling orders. It's like that's not the life that I want to live.
Well, that's also sort of an inherently low skill trade. Like you could hire like a college student to do that at a low wage, and they would be happy to do that, right? Like it doesn't require a ton of training. Like anyone who's out of work or who could use a little extra money or something like that, like who could be open to that. So that's one way to think about doing that. Yeah, that's interesting thinking. But still, you're saying that you would still recommend, and if you could go back, you would have taken more business and finance classes,
and I still should.
And you still should. It's not too late.
Another thing too is like really learn, like really figure out the value of yourself,
right?
And really look at your time, as money. That's a big thing for me. Another thing, one of my friends told me, she's a graphic designer, is I was trying to figure out a few years ago how I wanted to rate myself, and I was gonna, give a different price for editing videos versus, shooting videos. And she was like, why, how are those any different, right? Figure out a rate an hourly rate for your time.
Yeah.
Right. So like right now, how much are you paying me to be on this show? You're not, but it's like, but this is time that I do have an hourly rate attached to,
right?
Like I could be spending this time editing,
sure,
and that's, so figure out that rate. Now, also be flexible. I've got, due to, the amount of time I kind of have like agreed upon with the chiropractic office, I took a lower rate, because there's like that steadiness, right? So yeah, figure out what your time is worth to you, and value yourself. And then also, and this happens no matter what you're in, I feel like any field where you have to make that jump between whether it's you increase your rate, because you start low,
right? You
start low so you get clients, and so you get,
or do things for free.
Yeah, or
you
doing
see,
things
you see
for
people
free.
in creative always like they want to build a portfolio, so they're new to something and they're like, can I just build this for you for $20 instead of the $3,000 it would cost to have somebody else do it?
Yeah. Or even like we were talking with our shows, just this past week, like you got to make with our music shows.
Right.
It's like there's a point where you have to make that jump, and you have to make that jump to either raising your price or only taking certain clients or taking high caliber work or whatever you want to do, and you're going to lose something.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You're going to lose some of your old clients. They're going to be like, well, we can't afford that. We're going to go somewhere else,
But you have to make that
and
decision
it's scary
for yourself.
Yeah. But you just need to have your eyes and ears open and ready to make that jump, and know that it's just going to attract more of what you're looking for when you do make that jump.
Yeah.
When you do stop taking the low paying gigs, or,
yeah,
you're just going to attract more of them. One, because you're hungry, and because you're like, I got to make rent, know, but two, that's just, it's the law of attraction. It's that idea of kind of the universe giving back to you what you're putting out into it.
Right. I love I love that advice, the sort of attributing a value to yourself and your time. I'm telling my friend, like all the time, I'm telling friends. I mean, even Steve. Steve wanted to. I'd asked him to help me out with recording my own album, and he was like, "Dude, I just want to get better at this. Like, I just love doing this, and you're a friend of mine. It's fine." And I was like, "I'm not gonna let you do it for free, Steve." And I say that all the time to all kinds of people, to my friends all the time, just saying like, even if it's $5, attribute a value to it, because the people are gonna take your time more seriously. Like if I'm paying, even if it's a friend and we're doing something for each other, if I'm paying $5 for it, I might be less inclined to like flake on it or something like that.
Right. Yeah.
People are going to take it more seriously if they're even paying you anything. So I think that's great advice, especially for somebody who's an artist and or any entrepreneur really, who's kind of having to manage their own business, their own clientele, their own book in a sense.
Well, and as much as like, yeah, it's important for us to value ourselves as creatives, we need to value other people, right? Like you're just saying, like, if you can give that value to other people that you're working with, right? Like you just said with Steve, like that's amazing, because you're like, Steve doesn't have a microphone.
Is this where I talk or something?
Because that's important for us to do, as people who want to be valued, to value other creatives and other people and understand that like they're giving of their time.
Exactly. And that's what I was telling Steve, or literally anyone else. I'm just using Steve as an example because he's literally right here. But but like anyone else, like I tell them all the time, and occasionally it gets a weird reaction, but I'm not apologetic about it. I'll say like, I don't really do things for free. I don't work for free. If I'm gonna work, like internships, for example, in college, you see people always taking these unpaid internships. Like if you come to me with an unpaid internship, I'm closing the door on you. Like I understand that there's an opportunity, there's ways to cut your teeth, but like because I didn't take an unpaid internship when I was a sophomore in college, I spent the summer making $12 an hour at a paid internship.
Right.
And it was a pretty good experience, and I still got paid for my time, so I wasn't taken advantage of. I hear all the time these people who are unpaid interns and they're getting made to do like all kinds of weird work that they don't want to do, and hours beyond what they had agreed to, and working weekends and stuff for essentially nothing other than just the privilege of experience, which there's something to that. But at the same time, like if you were getting paid even $10 a day to do that, they might not bring you in on a Saturday to run horse blood through a centrifuge.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, the film industry is a huge, what's that word where you take advantage of people?
Predatory.
Yeah. I mean, they
well, music too. You see it all the time.
I'm sure. Yeah. But I've definitely spent a long time for a company doing stuff that was definitely like not an internship, right? Like,
right.
And it's tough. I go back and forth between like that thing. I wish I had done that.
Yeah, I mean, again, but this kind of goes back to our argument about like the business mind versus I want to say that this is probably something that my parents instilled in me. Mm-hmm. It's probably not necessarily something that I just came up with on my own, but I'm also more inclined to it. Like my brother was raised in the same family, but he's more inclined to like accept a unpaid internship,
right? Just
to get the experience and build up the resume. Like he sees some value in that and isn't like upset by it. I'm more like upset by it. That could just be sort of an upbringing thing, or just having heard it earlier on, or really within myself as well. But you're saying it on this podcast, so anyone who's listening to it and doesn't already do that, doesn't attribute a value to their time, like go do that.
Yeah, and the other thing too is what you were just saying, which is a great about putting value into your own time,
right?
Like you were saying, why you went into recording that album with Steve with some kind of like trade or monetary value, is that you are investing in it. You're investing in yourself.
Yep.
There's this great book, Deep Work, by Cal Newport, and he talks a little bit about that, especially like J.K. Rowling. She wrote the last Harry Potter like from a hotel room in whatever the capital of Scotland is. I can't remember.
Is it Glasgow?
No, it's
Why do we not know that? Oh, this is so embarrassing.
I can't remember it off the top of my head.
Anyone who's listening to this from any other country other than the U.S. is just laughing at us right now because they know the answer to this.
I mean, it's got the William Wallace Tower. Edinburgh.
Edinburgh.
Edinburgh. No, it's Edinburgh.
Are you Scottish?
I don't know. A little bit.
Me too, just a little. Anyway, Eden something.
Edinburgh.
Edinburgh. The capital of Scotland.
Yeah. And
J.K.
so
Rowling.
she paid, like she went there and she paid for this suite that had a awesome view of the castle. And she kind of broke through the block that she was having.
Yeah,
But she invested monetarily in that time. That's why I feel like retreats are an awesome thing. Although I want to Mary, my co-host, like she was on a retreat a couple weeks ago, work retreat she does twice a year where she focuses in on her own projects. And I was like, we got to come up with a better name,
Then what, retreat?
Then retreat. Because why would you, I don't want to retreat. I don't want to move backwards, right? Like the word itself is just it's not negative, but it's like an escape. It's like why do I have to retreat to do the things that really bring me joy and make me want to do? Like,
have you given any thought to what a better?
I mean, just like a work excursion or like an advance, but I don't like advance either.
Right.
Like I don't necessarily want to stick
pretty
with
good. Excursion. That's pretty good.
But investing that time and going to another place and removing yourself from your environment and pattern interrupt that's what it's all about. It's like, how do you interrupt your thought patterns, interrupt your creative pattern, interrupt all that stuff in order to like progress. So like a retreat where you're spending money on an Airbnb and you're going somewhere. I mean, hell, we could just go to San Francisco,
right,
and rent an apartment for 3 days and just say
we're going to $34,000,
right? Yeah,
because it's San Francisco. I get what you're saying, though.
Yeah. So valuing yourself, is a very important part of being any kind of creative, I feel like. And I think that's kind of what comes, that's also speaks to like the starving artist mentality. And it speaks to I don't remember if we had a word for it, but the like troubled artist, right?
Yeah.
Like there's the starving artist, and we're here talking about,
Yeah, which I can ask. We could talk about that.
But there's that brooding, the brooding artist, and like, yeah, there's a lot of good stuff about that. If you should read Liz Gilbert's Big Magic.
Give me the big idea. So for context for anyone who's listening here, we kind of talked a little bit beforehand about that a lot of art comes from a dark place, like a lot of great art does. I mean, a lot of great songs come from pain and suffering, and a lot of life is there's a lot of suffering in life. That's an inherent part of it. So that's something, of course, that a creatively minded person's going to draw from in their expression. But you in particular, like, you're a relatively positive guy. Like, certainly you like anyone else you have your moments of brooding or dark or whatever where you can draw from as inspiration for your art, but you're not like a hold up in your room and like screw the world. That's not your attitude, really. So talk a little bit about that, the whole brooding artist thing.
Yeah, well, I mean, I feel like it's a lie. You don't need to be an alcoholic. You don't need to get a heroin addiction. You don't need to don't do it. Just don't do it. Do anything else.
Yeah. Exercise. Go for a run.
Yeah, exactly. Go. I mean, why would you want that? We do. We romanticize it, right? We romanticize this
Kurt
idea.
Cobain and Hemingway and so many of these artists that
Philip
are like
Seymour Hoffman.
Oh man, I mean the list is endless.
Robin Williams, like
endless list. So many. Every comedian.
Yeah.
There's comedians joke about how much depression there is in comedy, but
right.
They joke about it because they're comedians and that's their job. But at the same time, if you're on the outside looking in, you're like, that's not good.
Yeah,
you shouldn't be you should be addressing that. But that is sort of true. Like a huge amount, like probably more than 80% of comics are depressed.
Right. Well, and it's something that I struggle with. Not struggle with, not depression.
The balance. No, the balance.
The balance and like the appreciation of like. I use my creativity to process a lot. Whether it's like processing ideas that I'm going through or emotions I'm feeling. And it comes out in all my outlets. So I have a lot of songs about leaving home because I was thinking about leaving,
Right.
or like a lot of songs about coming back because I'm coming back, or not about not being able to go back to Portland. And I have a lot of sad songs, and like I appreciate them because they help me process, and it also helps me visit and helps me remember. It's like writing a journal, right? Like when you're journaling, and like sometimes you go back and read your journals and you're like, God, it's such a little like whiny or like, or so in love, or
totally.
And you can go back and you're like, geez. And the scary thing about like going back is like realizing that you were there before, especially if you're in that place now,
Right.
Sometimes it's a great thing when you're like, if you're like, in the dumps and you look back and you're like, oh, I was in the dumps, but look at all this good stuff in between. It's
right.
like, okay, this can happen. These are cycles, right? Like I can.
Or
be
if you're
happy
great
again.
now and you look back and you're like, oh, I used to be in the dumps and I've gotten out of the dumps.
I could be back in the dumps at any moment.
You could think of it that way,
Right. So yeah, but also I struggle with the idea of like being too much in those negative places,
right?
Yeah, it's like I don't think I could live in a world where I don't listen to like a sad song. But there are those people that believe in that mindset of like, don't listen to violent music, don't listen to, and I do believe in a certain amount of like positivity and like vibrational kind of like influence of like
what you surround yourself with.
What you surround yourself with is what you're gonna put out.
Sure.
And so I wonder sometimes like, is it good to spend time in those places? But I'm a human and I feel like, and I'm gonna spend time there no matter what. So
if you're there, exactly.
May as well like revisit it and explore that and just
put it on paper or that's something that like I've been doing music for like 13 years now, and I remember like through high school, anytime I had a breakup, I would allot myself one breakup song. I'd be like you can't write 30 breakup songs, but let's write like one really good breakup song. And that was exactly what it was. It was like, it was a processing it thing. It was about getting through it. And usually when I would write one of those, and I have a few of them as a result. So some of them are, I look back at it and I'm like, ooh, no one should ever hear this ever. But at the time, like when you finish it, you do, I always felt anyway, like a sense of sort of relief from it. Like there was an optimism to it where it was like, okay, now like I'm able to see actually how I feel about it, and it's really not. Right. It's not negative.
You get to put a little label on it, put it in
Give
its
it
box,
a name.
stack it on the shelf over there, and you can visit from time to time, but you still have this like removed sense from it, where you're not like totally diving into it every time. I like to connect with my songs when I sing them and try to like put that forth to my audience, but also like there's a certain amount of like, it's over there. It's not in here anymore. And so I can visit it, I can take it out of the box, I can look at it, I can show it around. Right. I can put it back in the box.
And then it's on the shelf, and you're not having to like, it's not on you, it's in a box.
Well, that's the scary stuff we hear with like, and I don't know if this is true with Philip Seymour Hoffman, but I believe it to be true. And I believe it with a lot of actors, like, especially really good actors, like, they spend so much time doing, like, living in the places that all of us try to hide. Yeah. Yeah. That like,
well, like Keith Ledger, right? He's another example.
Yeah. And I don't know why they died or the circumstances or the depression, Sure. I just feel like we're taking a lot of roles where like, especially those two actors, where they're like, their feelings are so close to the surface. Their nerves are so exposed all the time. If they're doing their job like to the fullest of their extent, then
they did.
You're like, that's like nerves on air, right?
Yeah.
And they have to live in these places of like despicable people, or like all the emotions that the rest of us always like are trying to like hide. Yeah. They're constantly bringing those out because that's what we want to see on the screen. Right. And it's like, fuck, that's hard. Yeah. That's like, it's tough to ask people to do that too. And, but Big Magic, Liz Gilbert talks a lot about like, she talks about writing. She wrote Eat, Pray, Love. Okay. And she's a great example of a person that has just kind of been dedicated to her craft. I mean, she still had a job even while she was doing the tours for Eat, Pray, Love, and that was her like 5th novel, right? She had day jobs up until after Eat, Pray, Love. Right. And then she was able to just be a writer, right? Yeah. But she was published before that. Right. she's very inspiring. Her ideas about relationships to creativity and about moving away from that idea of the starving artist and that romanticism of it. And, you know, she comes from this place that like creativity, genius, if you will, is a thing that visits us. Creativity, ideas, they visit us, right? She talks about, you know, when you have an idea, right? And if you don't act on it, somebody else makes it.
Right.
You know?
Sure.
Or how like the idea of evolution popped up at the same time in two places without like fast communication. You know, they just had writing, but like Darwin and whoever the other guy was.
Oh man, I should know this, but I know who you're talking. God.
But like they were simultaneously like working on the idea of evolution.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. And there's other examples of that in history too.
And so it's just this beautiful idea that like ideas visit us. Ideas are like beings, and ideas want to be made, right? They want to work in conjunction with a human,
right,
to be expressed,
right.
And that's such like a more positive place of like that they
collaborating with the idea,
collaborating, and they want to be expressed, and they want to be realized and made real, and the same idea with genius too is that genius isn't like of us, where it's not inside of us; it's something that visits us, and that comes from the Greek. From way back, genius lived in the walls, like in the corners, and it would come down and visit you. And with genius, you know, it kind of removed that ego from it, right?
Yeah.
That ego from creating, because it wasn't just you having this great idea. It was you in conjunction, in collaboration with genius,
right?
You know, and then if it was a bad idea, it wasn't just you. It was that genius didn't show up, you know, or whatever. And so she talks a lot about her writing, you know, and like loving writing and loving that creative outlet, and that it wants to be expressed, you know, like
with you,
right?
As opposed to like you have to go seek it by,
right? It's like you need to grab it and like you know torture it. You need, like, and other great example was there's like the Syracuse University ecology professor that, you know, at the first day of her class asked the students like, raise your hand if you love the earth, you know, and everybody's hands go up.
Yeah.
And then they're like, raise now, keep your hands up if you feel like the earth loves you. And it's this idea that like we're not against the earth, right?
Right.
The earth doesn't want us to not be here. You know, you think about what we're doing, you know, and it's like it's having like the earth reacts to our actions, right? If you talk about global warming.
Well, and we react to the earths too.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's like,
if you look at earthquakes and.
Right. But it doesn't not want us to be here. It wants to live in harmony with us, right?
Right.
And now you think about that with your creative pursuit, you know, with your passion. Like, it's not like trying to destroy you, you know? It's not trying, like, and that's where that brooding artist, you know? It's like you don't need to live in this place of distraught and destruction and depression. I'd rather live in a place of, like, abundance and collaboration and exuberance, you know?
Awesome. And do you feel like you're there more often than not? Have you done anything consciously? I feel like that is part of your pattern interrupt, the idea behind your podcast. But do you feel that you're usually there? And if so, what have you done to actively help yourself be in that space more often?
I learned pretty early on that I collaborate.
Okay.
I love collaboration. It comes from, I learned it in film. You know, there's auteurs and there's people that want to be the one, you know, the leader, the figurehead, I guess.
Right. The front man.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's kind of hard because, you know, with Taller Younger Brother, I am doing that. I am saying this is me and my project.
Right.
But I'm also, you know, I want it to be collaborative. And I know that, like, it's going to be better with all of us than just by myself. You know, it's like, because we all bring different things to the table.
Right.
And I also realize that, like, you can plan as much as you want to, but the best things come from when, like, proper planning meets the time.
Serendipity and...
and collaboration with, like, your circumstances, you know?
Right.
What I learned in film is I can plan as much as I want. I did a lot of assistant directing, and that's running the machine. That's making sure that the production's happening on time, on budget. in the shit right there, you know, making sure all the cogs, all the different departments are doing what they need to do so that we can make our day. And one thing I learned a lot about was that I can plan as much as I want to, but then there's circumstances, right? Then there's the actual physical location, or there's time. And I think the true thing of creativity is collaboration, is like understanding that that's where it's going to shine. That's where it like really comes together. So I think the biggest thing for me, and I would like to take more into that idea of like collaborating with the idea, but is collaborating with other people. Yeah. And then one thing I've been thinking about it, I took a trip, drove around the country trying to find myself, you know? Yeah. Earlier this year.
Hence the leaving and the coming back songs.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I've left a lot of places. Came back to a lot of places too.
It's a very brooding artist of you to say.
I was reading.
So deep and mysterious, Kyle.
I try.
Right.
I try to, I'm an enigma.
Yes.
I'm the most open enigma you know.
Whoa. That itself is
enigmatic.
Yup.
That's my goal. I want to be enigmatic.
But also as open and transparent as possible.
Exactly.
Transparent enigma.
That's very true. That's actually exactly what I want.
We should change our band name to Transparent Enigma. So sorry. So you were saying like you took this trip.
I took this trip and I picked up. First place I stopped was Big Sur, the Henry Miller Library, which is beautiful. If you ever get down there, I picked up Catching the Big Fish by David Lynch. And David Lynch is, I would put him in my creative family tree.
Okay.
He's somebody whose like ideas and expression I respect.
Right.
I don't know if I could ever make anything like him, but I want like his influence to be like hanging around on my shoulder, you know?
Right.
And he talked about this idea of working with the ideas. And this is kind of along the Liz Gilbert line, but like it's a conversation with an idea, right? Like it comes back and forth. And so he's talking to like when he's talking to an actor and trying to get a scene right with a script, you know, like they'll run through it and then he'll just have a conversation, maybe not about the script, maybe not about the movie, you know, they just talk. And through that, then they'll rehearse it again. And it might be a little bit closer to what he's envisioning, you know, for that scene. And then they'll talk some more. Or he'll do it with a prop person who's like, brings up a phone. He's like, no, it's not, that phone's not quite right. But they'll have a conversation, maybe about the phone, maybe about the script, maybe about themes or whatever. Mm-hmm. And this is one of the big things for me this year is like resolving ideas and, you know, trying to bring an idea that wants to be made to fulfillment by having active conversations with that idea. Yeah. And the last point to this being, I visited a painter friend of mine in Lafayette, Louisiana, and he was like, I don't know what I'm doing. Like he's painting. And he's like, but I've got a lot of ideas I'm trying to resolve. And so this kind of like fit into that, this Liz Gilbert, David Lynch, like whole thing of like working with the ideas and resolving stuff in the process, right? And it's been a struggle for me with creativity of like understanding that it is a process. Right. That it's all about the process.
Everything
that's
is
why
process.
Like Jackson Pollock, you know, it's like, it's not about that painting that's there. It's about the process and what he was trying to resolve and like what he was trying to express to himself and trying to figure out, you know? Right. And that's like, so I try to bring that back to, you know, I've got this like idea that's been bouncing around in my head for a film and I don't know what shape it's going to take, but I try to write, you know, just write on it, just free write and like, just help it, draw it out, speak to this idea. Ask it, what are we trying to resolve? Where are we trying to go? What are we exploring here? Yeah. So that's the biggest thing for me that I've been trying to put into practice is like the process. And it's been helpful putting this into words because I've always felt process oriented. I've always what I considered been a collage artist. Mm-hmm. Is I'll see something or I'll hear something that triggers me. And then from there I will start to build. And I gave myself a lot of flack for this for a while because I thought all great artists started with like these grand ideas, right? Or these flashes of inspiration, and then they like built to that, you know, they got there. And so I've always kind of felt like, am I a real artist or not? Like I don't have like, what's my vision? I don't have a vision because I move through the process, right? And through the process, I'm able to get deeper and collaborate, right? It's all about that collaboration with the idea, collaborating with the circumstances and the ideas that really, and with the other people in my life or in that project that just take it to places. And I had this music video I did for my friends and up in Portland for a song called I Want More Alcohol, parentheses, it makes me sadder. And luckily I had some collaborators I was working with at the time that I trusted a lot, and we talked through the idea, and we never really like storyboarded it.
Right.
But now when I watch it, I couldn't imagine it any other way. You know, it like the visuals are just like we all came together and we all collaborated with the idea, with the song, with the musicians, with each other, and created something that's just, you know, awesome.
Nice. Teamwork. So I think that's a great place to segue into one more subject on creativity before we completely switch gears and talk a little bit about nutrition for a few minutes, because I know that's something else that you're pursuing. But on the subject of creativity, excuse me, just to kind of wrap that idea up, for someone who's not, maybe this is a limiting belief too, but for someone who doesn't consider themselves creatively inclined or naturally creative, or maybe they are creative, but they don't have any ways to express it that they feel any sense of self-efficacy. Like, I'm creative, but only with like shitty arts and crafts, and I don't actually like build anything meaningful, and that's just who I am.
Right.
But for people who feel that way, they are missing out on that collaboration with ideas and with other people in that regard, and they might be finding it elsewhere. But what would be your advice, I guess, to somebody like that, as far as for those who aren't as naturally inclined? Do you feel that those individuals need more creativity in their lives? And if so, what would you suggest or prescribe for that?
That's a good question. Shit. I feel like we all need creativity, much like I feel like we all need logic, you know, or like I need more of a business mind, you know?
Sure.
All of these things it's about balance,
right.
And it's about energy, and it's about, you know, these cycles of energy that we go through and having the right tools for the right time, for the right job. And I feel that the one thing creativity allows for is just thinking outside the box and putting yourself in a different place for a minute, which I feel like is something that's so needed right now in our country, in the world. You know, it's just like you hear, especially with social media, everything moves so fast. Ideas and responses and reactions, right? And creativity to me allows for people to take a moment to like breathe. And, you know, I'd love like if, you know, we have like these contentious arguments all across like amendment rights and all that shit. And it's like, what if we were just like to do a thought experiment for a little bit, you know? Like let's like you and me, we have differing opinions about like guns or whatever, but like let's go in a room and let's like imagine this world. Let's talk it out. Let's imagine a world where like nobody has guns, all right?
Right.
Okay, well that maybe not be able to work, but let's imagine where everybody has guns.
Right.
All right, now let's imagine a place where like it's more difficult to get a gun, right? Like let's just like live in those places and explore them. And I feel like that's kind of what creativity can allow for. Outside of like that's what creativity means to me. And it is involved with logic, and it's involved with like all of these things, right? As opposed to just making art, right?
Right.
So I feel like a creative mindset is bigger than that. It's lateral thinking. It's, you know, but
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I know plenty of people who are not extracurricularly very creative. Like they're not musicians or
Right.
painters or writers or anything like that, but they find outlets in their work or in their personal life to exercise some creativity and still glean some benefits of creativity from that. But maybe for those individuals, maybe they do feel like they want to be creative, like with regards to the arts. So
Right.
what would be your kind of response to that line of thinking?
I think one thing I would do would be, I saw this great journal. I haven't picked it up yet, but it's like it's like trash this journal or something.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Like,
and it's like on this page, stab the shit out of it and
exactly.
throw it off a 2-story building.
Tie a string around it and drag it on a walk, you know?
Yeah.
I was like, that's fucking awesome. Like, and that's like that pattern interrupt stuff again.
Right.
You know, it's just like, what did you do when you were a kid? You know, on a rainy day, and just try to access that.
Yeah.
And I think one thing is to take it off the pedestal.
Yeah.
Right? Take it off the pedestal a little bit, to fuck around and fuck up, and know that like nobody's gonna see it. You know, that's like pattern interrupt. Every episode we do a pattern interrupt at the end.
Yeah.
And like, I don't consider myself good at drawing.
Okay.
But when I do it, I'm pretty happy with the results. And these pattern interrupts are these little like exercises. So I would, you know, you can go online and find some exercises, you know, pattern interrupt, pipc.xyz. We've got a list of all the pattern interrupts that are just like
PIPC?
Yeah.
.xyz.
Correct.
Okay.
pipc.xyz.
Okay.
We've got a list of pattern interrupts that we've done, like, you know, go lie down on the ground and take a picture outside upside down. You know, just ways to like try to trigger that creativity, to do something a little different, to see the world a little bit differently.
Yeah.
You know, draw a portrait of the person across the table from you without looking down at your paper and without picking your pen or pencil off the paper.
Yeah. Just little exercises.
Just
like
little
that
exercises
to
to start exercise. Yeah.
Work that muscle out, because it is like anything else. It is a muscle.
Right. It's a muscle. And the biggest thing for me with creativity too is like when I do something else creative, like that's where kind of like I start to access solutions for other problems, you know?
Right.
And it's like, oh, I have writer's block, or, you know, I'm having trouble dealing with this person. Like, okay, I'm going to go like draw. And then like, oh, there's some solutions just like popped in my head in that like clear space.
Right.
But I think try not to worry about it too much, and then and it's fun, you know. But I mean, and maybe an accountability partner too.
Accountability buddy?
Yeah, I think that's a big one for me. Just finding somebody that like, you know, challenge each other.
Yeah.
Create a Google Doc where you draw every day, or, you know, like make somebody laugh. You know, it just like gives you somebody to like to vamp off of, or to challenge each other a little bit.
And like you said, it makes it easier. Any form of accountability makes it so much easier to stick to the things that you do. Like, it doesn't really matter if you really do fancy yourself an extremely introverted, lone wolf, brooding artist individual. We're all still very social creatures. Yeah. And so putting it out there socially, any goal, any task, anything like that, and having somebody to help you with that is like so immense. I mean, so many people can't even exercise alone. Like, they just hate exercise, or they just won't do it. Right. But it's like, hey, I have a schedule that I'm going to this Zumba class with my best friend 3 days a week. I can't flake.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like, talking to strangers is very difficult for me. And I want to try taking like street pictures of a stranger. And so I told my buddy in New Orleans, it's like, all right, let's both go do this today, you know? And I did it.
You did it.
Yeah. Because like, would I have done it on myself? It's like, I'm sitting there in my room. It's like, man, I wish I could take great street photos, but I'm like scared of talking to strangers. So I guess I'm going to go do something else.
Right. And not do that.
Yeah. Whereas
but you had some backup.
I was like, man, I really want to do this. He's like, well, let's both go do it right now, you know? And so we did. And yeah, it's just, so yeah, just
awesome. So if you're not creatively inclined, take it off the pedestal.
Take it off the pedestal.
Do some exercises.
Do some small exercises.
Work out that muscle.
And find a partner in creativity.
Awesome.
Ooh, PIC.
PIC.
Partner
in creativity.
Yeah.
That is a beautiful place for us to make a complete 180. So for anyone who's listening and wanted to listen for creativity only, we'll probably wrap it up about there. But anyone who wants to hear a little bit about what Kyle's been doing in the space of nutrition and budgeting, in terms of finding it as an exercise and empowerment, right? Yeah. Getting control of those things.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about that, because you and I haven't talked too much about this. So
no.
Just go ahead and start riffing. But I would love to hear about what you're doing there.
It's a lot about it's very similar to what we were just talking about creativity and about the well-rounded, right? Like I've never told myself that I'm I'm not an athletic person.
Okay.
I'm not financially minded.
Limiting beliefs.
Right, exactly.
Limiting beliefs.
Yeah. So those are the stories I tell myself, right?
Right,
But
sure.
But they're not necessarily true. You know, it's like, what do I value? And what do I don't know. It's always scary. It's scary to look at your nutrition. It's scary to look at your finances.
Right.
For me, you know, it's easy.
I think for a lot of people,
It's
like you don't know how many calories you're eating until you count them, and then you're like,
Right.
oh, sick.
Yeah.
4,500 calories a day.
And I don't even know what that means necessarily,
Right.
too, right? Like there's a certain
How
amount
fast
of
will I die?
education that like I don't have.
Sure.
And same with budgeting or like investing. But I started probably like, I guess maybe it was a year ago. My buddy told me about You Need a Budget,
Yep.
which is like an online app.
Yep.
And,
I've plugged them before on the show.
Cool.
Yeah.
And it's, you know, I've just really started like taking a look at, and I had tried Mint before,
Yep.
but
Also plugged them on the show before.
Sweet. Cool. But for that one, I couldn't really get into it. And I wasn't in a place where like I was ready to take a look at my finances.
Right.
And like still like every month, like every few weeks, like I'll stop looking at the budget and I'll just kind of spend and be like, I'm sure it's okay, you know? But I get nervous about it.
Right.
And then when I do go and I reconcile my accounts, you know, I'm kind of like, okay, it gives me a power over, even if it's scary, I feel so much more empowered when I know where my money is and where it's going.
Right.
And most recently, now I've been switching to kind of nutrition and that same idea of like, when I understand more about what I'm putting in my body, that gives me a power over my body. And then kind of the two things, those are kind of the two most important things I feel like to have sovereignty in the world, right? Is like power over your finances and power over your body.
Sure. Yeah, that's true. If you have those, what else is there? I mean,
Creativity, you know?
Exactly. But once you have those two, if you really are sovereign over both of those things to a pretty sufficient extent, then there's not that much else limiting you in other areas. Like you're sort of free to do whatever you like with that.
Right.
With that scenario that you've created for yourself, you can now dedicate more of your time to creativity or to social activities.
Yeah. Or you can vote with your dollar, you know?
Yeah.
Or,
sure.
you know, you don't know what you don't know. And when you don't know how you're spending your money or what you're putting into your body, then you really lose
Control over it.
control.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that's just been a big thing because I didn't really grow up. I mean, my parents are pretty fiscally responsible.
Yeah.
And, you know, I got a lot of like, I wouldn't call them lectures, but talked at, you know,
Right.
a lot about finances in the past. And so I never really like, you know, it's always kind of been back there, but it really does allow me to have a greater amount of control over my life.
Yeah.
You know,
There's a picture of myself as a child that I saw recently where my dad's lying down and I was probably 7 or 8 and I distinctly remember it because I look at this picture, I'm like, I remember this moment. I'm like crying on his chest. You could see like his sweater is all covered in tears and I'm like punching him. I'm like so upset. And the context of this photo is that my grandparents had sent me $100 like as a birthday gift or a holiday gift maybe. And my dad told me like, you're old enough now that we are opening a bank account for you and you have to save all of this. And I was so furious. But that's sort of the fear, right? That's like the innate primal, like that's part of that is like, it sort of feels like that to take control of your finances is that like for a moment you want to cry and punch and kick and scream a little bit.
Right.
But I think that's one of the kinds of lessons that like I sort of became a money hoarder, like in a healthy way. But I think those kinds of experiences in my upbringing shape that now. So if you haven't done that as a child, you're gonna experience the exact same thing that I did when I was 7, just like as an adult. Right. But you have to push through that in order to gain control.
it's the same thing as like making that value jump in yourself as a creative professional, you know, there's going to be some growing pains.
Yeah.
You know, when you take a hard look at where you're spending your money, you're kind of like, oh, you know, that's a lot of eating out. Or that's like, it's like, shit, I spent $400 this month on like eating out.
On In-N-Out.
Right.
On literally fast food burgers, $400.
But and so there's transition time, you know, and to really start to see your savings turn around or saving towards that vacation, you know, or like a little bit, you know, it's like now I'm just finally like was able to like get a little bit ahead of my rent. Yeah. You know, where I actually have money from last month's paycheck going towards my rent. Yeah. So it's a slow process. Right. But very rewarding. Right. And the same thing with, you know, when you start looking at what you're putting into your body.
I mean, you really are what you eat. I remember hearing on some podcasts a really interesting example of like if you hunt bears, like obviously you have to have a license to do this. I'm not saying go shoot bears, but if you're hunting bears, like certain types of bears are fairly edible and certain types of bears really aren't tasty at all. And apparently a lot of what determines that is time of year, because from time to time what you'll get is in certain seasons, like a black bear it'll be like berry season. And so those bears will have a ton of access to like blueberries. And if you shoot these bears and then you cut them up to eat them, their flesh is actually like purple or blue during that season. And when you eat it, it's actually way sweeter. So it goes from being like I don't know, maybe like in the summer they're eating fish and like rotting meat or something, and like they're red and disgusting to eat. But if you get them in that certain like that blueberry season, their flesh is actually bluer in color and it tastes more sweet, the meat itself. Right. So there you go. You are what you eat. If you're eating a ton of high fructose corn syrup, you're corn. Congratulations on being human corn. Like, let's take control of that and like put earth foods in your body more often and like be an actual composite human being.
Yeah. Another big part of it for me is I grew up I still have, you know, however you want to say it, like asthma and eczema, you know. Like I had the triple threat: hay fever, asthma, eczema.
Nice.
My folks had it, you know, like. Awesome. So what happens when you're born, especially and you grow up and you have these things, is that you're not given very much power at a young age. Yeah. Right. You're not given much education. And you're given ointments and steroid inhalers, right? Right. And then I go my entire life like this is normal, you know. It's like I take an inhaler, you know, in the morning and at night, and then I was taking my like steroid fast inhaler probably like every other day, which you're supposed to only do like maybe once a week. So who knows how fucked up my lungs are? But you know, when you start looking at nutrition and you hear about all this stuff and about like the gut and digestion and like that's another powerful part for me. Like I understand like when I have a glass of wine and my like airway starts closing up, you know, I understand that it's a trigger now and I can choose whether I want that trigger or not, you know, that's power to me, you know. That gives me stuff back into my hands, you know. It's like I don't have to rely on, you know, and it's still a process of like figuring out like through nutrition what is my body reacting to. What, you know, the other week my skin had flared up a lot and I just started eating a lot of like almond butter as like snacks, and so I started looking it up, and it was like, well, a lot of people, you know, looking at the reactions to almonds, and it's like, well, maybe I'm allergic to almonds. And I've always kind of like felt after eating a few, like things felt a little weird in my throat. Right. I never really thought much of it. Yeah. Nothing really came. And now it's like, well, maybe almonds aren't the thing for me, you know? So it's like, that's that other part of that nutrition power, you know, for me.
Paying attention to it and...
Yeah, and that I don't, you know, I'm not as limited by my body, you know. My body wants to work with me, right? Like, you know, it's not trying to, just like creativity, you know, it's not trying to like kill me. Right. It just wants to like be respected, and like, how do I know, you know? So nutrition has been the way that I've been able to start exploring that. I still like, you know, to like get some tests done would be rad, you know, to like see what I'm allergic to. Like, what have I been putting in my body for 29 years that like my body's been like, we don't
really
like
bad
that
for us.
We're not enjoying this.
It took me till I was, I used to get stomach aches all the time, and I thought I just had like a really weak stomach. But as it turns out, I was lactose intolerant, and I didn't find that out till I was about 15. And it took me like 2 years of experimenting with like, take this out of my diet. Like maybe I eat too many Ritz crackers, or maybe it's this or that. And, it took a while, but now like I know that, so I can carry around an enzyme to handle it, or just avoid dairy or high quantities of dairy. And my general the way that I feel, like I don't get stomach aches like ever anymore. hardly ever, basically never, unless I like get food poisoning or something, which is also extremely unusual circumstance for me. So from going from like multiple times a week, I felt bad physically, was like, oh, I need to lay down, versus now it's like maybe once every few months I have a stomach ache. Being able to control it in that way is great too. So that's I guess that's another takeaway that is related to nutrition, is like everyone's body's a little different. I have a friend of mine who's she's like gluten intolerant. Right. If she like has a beer or eats, like she gets like a rash on her stomach. So it's not celiac, it's not just like this like gluten fad thing. It's like she was really able to suss out, like she gets a reaction from it and feels not great.
Right.
So yeah, definitely a great way to take control as well. And those things they're sort of a blessing in disguise too, because people will say like, oh, you're lactose intolerant, like don't you just want to die? You can't eat all the ice cream and all the pizza.
Right. I'm
like, dude, I just have these things in moderation. And it's easier for me than it is for you to just like stay hot. You know what I mean? Like to just like be physically not, I mean, obviously being facetious, but like I'm not as tempted to eat a pint of ice cream.
Right.
Because I'll feel really, really bad a quarter into that.
Yeah.
So I just don't. And same thing with like the gluten thing. Like she eats very healthy because she gets she has a reaction. So for anyone who feels like they feel bad, like take control of your nutrition. Like take a look at your nutrition, and see if it's something related to that.
And the other thing, it's the holidays, so it's been tough. Like eating, drinking. Like,
well, not tough to eat.
No,
it's really
it's easy to eat. We were in Fort Collins, and like there's breweries in Fort Collins. Like, no, I'm not gonna go to the New Belgium Brewery.
Right.
No, I'm not gonna go to Odell's and try like some like fresh beer. But the other powerful thing is like, one, I try not to like shame myself, and two, to like recognize the effects that these things do have when I do reintroduce them into my body, or be like, oh, do I feel that way because, I did have some sugar last night? Interesting. Like, good to know. Is that something I want to repeat doing, or is that something that I should really just like stop doing because I don't enjoy the after effects? It's like, it's interesting to see that like everything you put into your body can have a reaction.
Yeah.
And like, alcohol is the easy one, like a hangover, right? But like, I mean, like, I think I've experienced like gluten hangovers now, like,
oh yeah,
when you go
so
ham on that stuffing, and like just feel like shit the next morning.
Yeah, totally.
It's like, and generally they're together, I'm also having a beer and some wine. Sure, it's like just
a cocktail of awful inflammatory. Yeah. I mean, but that's a great point though. I mean, there is like literal scientific responses to that. Like if you eat simple carbohydrates, you get an insulin spike. Your body produces more insulin to deal with that. But a high insulin spike causes a sort of a dip below baseline shortly thereafter. So this is why, like, if you eat a lot of Chinese food or you eat a piece of toast, 30 minutes later, you could totally go for another piece of toast or some more Chinese food, and you're like hungry again. Versus like if you eat chicken and broccoli and I don't know, something else that isn't carby, you might not be hungry for a couple of hours. It's like it's more sustainable, or a complex carb like oatmeal or something like that causes a more steady spike, a more steady insulin reaction. But yeah, that's what happens is like you eat a piece of cake and then your insulin goes like up through the roof to deal with that, and then half an hour later it's like it's negative, and so your body's like recalibrating to get back to zero, and it's like, well, we need some more sugar in this body. So 30 minutes after eating a piece of cake, you're like, what sounds great right now is a piece of cake.
Yeah.
So I mean, to your point, like there are reactions to everything that you put in your body. You could notice it easily.
Yeah, it's a wonderful thing to get to play with and have the power.
And it's going to be different for everyone.
Absolutely.
My brother, I mean, obviously my brother and I, we grew up in the same house eating essentially the same food, and we're 50% shared genetics, and we're only 3 years apart. We're both fairly physically active and of approximately similar size as well, but if he eats carbs at night, he would find that he would wake up, like he would have a hard time going to sleep, and then he would wake up like feeling very hot. Like his body would just run hotter. So he optimized his diet to include fewer carbs just because he just felt bad on them. And so he would just eat less carbs, or he would switch to more complex carbs like brown rice and oatmeal as opposed to white rice and cereal like right before bed or something. Versus myself, like I don't get that. My body processes carbs pretty well. Like I can kind of snack on junk food all day, and like I don't feel better. It's not the same. Like I feel better if I'm eating like clean, but but I don't feel bad, versus like he physically feels warm. So everyone's going to be different. You got to figure out what it is for you, and then take control of it.
Yeah. The other thing that I really appreciate about focusing on budgeting and nutrition, and it ties in with creativity too, is, and it's a big buzzword these days, but is mindfulness of it all. You know, that like practiced meditation, or, you know, it just like causes you to pause,
right,
and take a look and reflect. And whether that's like taking the time to cook a meal, or taking the time to like reconcile your accounts and look at your budget versus your checking account, you know. And I feel like mindfulness is just one of the biggest, just a huge thing that everybody can benefit with,
right,
in your creativity in your life. Is just like pausing,
right,
breathing, and doing what I like to call the not the hard thing, but sometimes not doing. Fuck, I can't remember what the word is for like the easy thing. But you know, just do one thing a day that's not easy.
Right.
You know, that's not the like
challenge yourself
fast way.
Right.
Just do one thing a day that causes you to pause and like, and work through these steps to get to an end. And, you know, I can't remember what the fucking word is. Number 3, is that the third word I forgot? 4th.
That's okay. Words are hard. There's
Words
so
are
many.
hard.
There's
Man.
so many of them.
Yeah. The other day I was like trying to remember the word scent, but I said flavor instead.
Nice.
Yeah.
Like what flavor of deodorant?
Well, pretty much. I was like, do we need to stop to get more flavors? Because we're going to make candles.
Nice.
What kind of nose flavor do we want?
So I got some shit for that. I like words and using them correctly.
Awesome. Well, I'm sure it'll come to you right after the podcast, and then you'll be like, damn it.
Yeah.
Dude, it's been great. I don't know how long we've been going for, like an hour and a half, I feel like. Yeah. So awesome conversation, dude. You kind of wrapped it up there with mindfulness, but any parting words for anyone who's listening before we sign off? Because I think, you know, mindfulness does help. That pertains to creativity and nutrition and finances. But anything else that you would add to that before we go ahead and say goodbye?
I just think that's a pretty good note to end on.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Mindfulness.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Great. Well, Kyle, thanks so much for being on the show, man.
My pleasure.
I really
Thanks for
appreciate it.
having me.
Awesome, guys. As always, be sure to check out the website at thewealthyhealthy.co. And, of course, subscribe to whichever medium you prefer, the blog or the podcast or both. Leave any comments, praise, criticism, anything like that. It's always, always helpful. And
I remembered it.
What is it?
Do one thing that's not convenient every day.
Convenient was...
What an easy word.
Oh, man. Okay,
It's very
guys.
convenient to forget.
Right, so inconvenient that you forgot and remembered at the outro. That's great, guys. We're completely off the rails. Thewealthyhealthy.co. We'll hit the music. Until next time, everybody. Later.